Hello, welcome to IDT Talks. My name is Anastasia Larina. Today we have a very distinguished guest joining me now from Washington, D.C. It's Obay Shahbandar, defense analyst. We're welcome to IDT Talks.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
Thank you very much for joining our discussion today. So Donald Trump is to return to the power in January 2025. How do you expect the U.S. foreign policy to shift, particularly with regards to its role in global security?
President Trump is back, the 45th and now the 47th president. He's due to take office in a few short days. And from all expectations is that his team is going to hit the ground running. Remember, he only has one term, 4 years. He can't run anymore. So all indications are that his national security team and foreign policy team has an agenda that they want to implement as soon as he takes office on January 20th. There are a couple of key themes here to look at to understand President Trump's worldview and what we can expect in terms of America's foreign policy and national security strategy under President Trump, some of which he has laid out extensively in his first term. First and foremost, America first. So this is going to be an American foreign policy that is going to be non-interventionist, that is going to look at establishing trade deals that will not only benefit America, but will also establish a win-win with America's partners and potential adversaries. The U.S. is going to take a much different approach when it comes to China, when it comes to Russia. And we're already seeing President Trump lay out his foreign policy vision when it comes with major trade partners like Canada and Mexico and China. Of course, President Trump is saying that he's going to enact significant tariffs on both Mexico and China and potentially even Denmark if they don't agree to some key demands. Now, what are tariffs? Tariffs are essentially putting a major tax on goods that are being exported by those countries to the American consumers. And that is essentially will be retaliatory. And that's something that President Trump that is a powerful tool, given that America is the biggest and most powerful economy. And of course, the world banking infrastructure is essentially based in New York. So when America puts tariffs on goods of another country, that sends a powerful political and economic signal to those foreign capitals that, hey, if you don't agree to President Trump's demands, then there are going to be severe financial repercussions. And that's something you can expect President Trump, that a powerful diplomatic tool that President Trump is going to use on a regular basis, much more so than his predecessor, Joe Biden. So non-interventionist, but you're also going to have a tough president, a president that wants to make deals, but is also very clear to America's partners and adversaries and those in between that he is willing to use the full might of America's economy and to get what he wants. We're already seeing that with Greenland. You know, why did I mention potential tariffs on Denmark? Well, President Trump in his speech yesterday said that if a deal between Denmark and America on Greenland, which has significant strategic value to the U.S., is not reached, then the U.S. will put a significant amount of tariffs on Denmark once President Trump takes office. We also saw President Trump make a threat, to Beijing, saying, "Hey, you're pumping all this fentanyl, a narcotic, through Latin America that's then making into the American public, into the American market that has millions addicted to it, is killing millions. If Beijing does not adhere to President Trump's demands to put a stop to these fentanyl manufacturers in China that are then shipping their deadly cargo to Mexico, that's then being smuggled into the U.S. and then Trump is going to enact harsh sanctions that will damage the Chinese economy." So this is a president that's when he says that he is going to take action, he is going to take action. And those threats are not just, empty threats. When President Trump says that he's going to take a certain course of action if another country does not shift its policy in the way that President Trump wants it to, then there are going to be significant repercussions. And that's something we're already seeing. We're seeing, many here in Washington are calling it the Trump effect. World leaders across the world understand that this is an American president that means business.
Well, I do agree that Donald Trump is trying to be sure with his words. If he made a statement, he's trying to implement them. But at the same time, we do remember some moments when he was talking about some significant changes in the foreign policy of the United States, but it remained only words. Now, two very important issues, Greenland and Canada. Donald Trump has already said that he is planning to buy Greenland when he becomes a president. And we do remember he made the same statement during his first president term. And about Canada, he is planning to have Canada as 51st state of the United States of America. So should they expect Donald Trump to move from the words to the actions?
Well, everything is negotiable. And I think President Trump wants to negotiate more favorable trade deals with Canada, and Canada is America's biggest trading partner. And then, Mexico and then China is another major, trading partner. So I think the issue is with Trudeau, who's now resigned as the Prime Minister of Canada, really goes back to, okay, Trump wants to use leverage to get what he believes is a better deal for the American taxpayer. Is the U.S. going to annex Canada? Probably not. But, President Trump, when he drives a hard bargain, and that's why he was elected, he is the negotiator in chief. He wants to renegotiate trade deals with America's biggest trading partners because he believes that America is not being treated fairly, that other countries they have a export surplus while the U.S. has this massive deficit, and he wants to bridge that divide between the surplus and the deficit, and he wants the U.S. to have better deals while other countries like Germany, like China, they have protectionist measures. So why should the U.S. not have a similar protectionist policy to ensure that the American taxpayer gets the best deal when it comes to America's trade deals with other countries? And that is a key message by President Trump, and that you can certainly expect him to follow through on that promise. And look, this is a president that sees opportunities. He doesn't see permanent adversaries or permanent allies, but he sees strategic opportunities, and that gives him a lot more leverage in the negotiating table with other countries. Some call it unpredictability, but President Trump loves to use that unpredictability to enhance his negotiating leverage with other countries, whether it's Canada, whether it's China, whether it's NATO member states. He wants, President Trump has been very clear. He wants European countries to do more to pay for their defense and to not only completely depend on the American military, the American taxpayer to defend their continent.
So more in details, how do you think Trump's return to the power will affect the U.S. relationship with NATO and European Union? We do all remember his precise position on the case that the countries and member states of NATO should be able to provide 2% of their GDP to sustain the work of the organization. As for now, do you think that European countries may decide to have more independent defense policy, even NATO member states, or there will be still significant dependence on the decisions made by Washington?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's been a key demand by President Trump for the NATO military alliance. Remember, in his first term, I mean, there was hardly any of the NATO member states were paying that 2% of their GDP to go to their defense. Now, that has been a key demand of the president, saying that, hey, we have thousands of American troops in Europe. The U.S. is essentially the first line of defense for the European continent since the Second World War. But why are rich European countries like Germany, like France, the United Kingdom, and others who are members of the NATO military alliance, why are they not doing more to defend their backyard? Now, we have been seeing more members of the NATO military alliance reaching that 2% threshold. And what we mean by that 2% threshold, that 2% of their GDP is going to defense. But there is still a lot more that can be done. And you're already seeing that Trump effect. The incoming Secretary General of the NATO military alliance went down to Mar-a-Lago after the election to meet with President Trump to reassure him that he will continue to press NATO member states to do more to pay for their defense and to not only completely depend on the U.S., which is by far the largest contributor to the NATO military alliance. And so that is already having an impact that you can certainly expect more pressure by President Trump on NATO to do more to defend their continent, given the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, that it shouldn't be a burden that is solely put on the American taxpayers, particularly because now the US has to worry about what's going to happen in the Pacific with Taiwan, with China. The Chinese are making moves. Xi Jinping may want to take over Taiwan to reunify with the Chinese mainland. And the US just does not have enough troops and manpower to both focus on a European conflict and one based in the Pacific with a great power like China. So that message by President Trump that to European countries that you need to do more to pay for your own defense and not completely depend on the US, that's going to be a key theme of President Trump's administration. And he was criticized for it in his first term, but hey, it's working so far.
Right. It's clear about the position of the United States of America when it comes to the situation between Russia and Ukraine, or as you previously said, the situation between the United States of America and China, the Taiwan issue. But apart from that, we have a quite unstable situation in the Middle East, latest developments in Syria, and also the situation in Gaza. Therefore, what should we expect from Donald Trump when it comes to the future US policy in the Middle East?
Well, President Trump gave a speech yesterday where he expressed full confidence in his special envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, who's been traveling in the region. So having a special presidential envoy that reports directly to President Trump, that will focus on the Middle East, that will focus on the peace process in the Middle East, I think is very important, because that sends a message that President Trump is deploying one of his most senior advisors, most trusted advisors, to work on this very complex and thorny issue. President Trump has made it very clear that if Hamas does not release the hostages, there will be, quote, hell to pay. And President Trump, when he makes those threats, they are not empty threats. So the fact that you have a revamped Middle East team as part of that special envoy led by Steve Witkoff, who's been a long-time President Trump confidant, I think is a powerful signal that President Trump is going to be very heavily involved in the Middle East. At the same time, President Trump also, in that speech yesterday, he praised President Erdogan of Turkey, saying that they have a strong relationship, that Turkey has an important role to play in Syria. And I think that means that the U.S., under the Trump administration, is going to strongly rethink the value of having 2,000 American troops stationed in Syria when you have now Turkey and other Arab states involved in the rebuilding of Syria. So I think there's going to be a strong desire in the Trump administration to look at the strategic value of continuing having those American troops in Syria. President Trump has also nominated one of his longtime advisors, Tom Barak, as the nominee for the American ambassador to Turkey. And I think that also signals that you can expect American relations with Turkey to be strong under the Trump administration.
Obay, how do you assess the geopolitical dynamics in the South Caucasus? As we move into 2025 and Donald Trump is coming to power, do you expect United States to be more involved in the processes taking place here between, let's say, our countries, Azerbaijan and Armenia? Actually, the relations between the United States and Azerbaijan worsened during the time of presidency Joseph Biden. We all know about the destructive role of Soros in some other countries, and the same issues was raised by President Ilham Aliyev during his latest interview to the local TV channels. It's good that we don't have any problem now with this in our country, in Azerbaijan, but the policy of Soros in some other countries, including Georgia, affected negatively the political processes there. Therefore, what should we expect from Donald Trump when it comes to the situation in our region?
Well, George Soros tried to take President Trump down. George Soros is paying prosecutors and district attorneys across America to go after not only President Trump, but his key advisors. The Trump team calls it lawfare, warfare using the judicial system. And that has been a key tactic of George Soros in the U.S. And he has attempted to use and George Soros is attempted to use those tactics to try to stop President Trump from winning the election. And many in President Trump's circle, and certainly President Trump himself, view George Soros as a malign actor, as somebody who's trying to unduly influence American politics using his billions of dollars. And that's, of course, something that we've seen George Soros do in Europe, like in Albania and in Georgia, and so and in the South Caucasus. So I think you will have a president coming into the White House here that is fully aware of what George Soros really stands for, because he was on the receiving end. He was a target. President Trump and his team were targets of George Soros's attempt to capture American state institutions and then to use them against people that he politically disagreed with, like President Trump. So I think you're going to have an administration here that is fully aware of what George Soros stands for, and I think there's going to be efforts here, especially with the new the nominee for Attorney General, Pam Bondi, very close advisor to President Trump, and the nominee for the FBI, Kash Patel, another strong President Trump supporter. I think they are going to have a mandate once they are confirmed by the Senate to ensure that George Soros' sort of deep state, his attempt to capture key state institutions in the judiciary and among key prosecutors are not used to illegally go after political opponents. So I think you have a very strong commonality here between what President Trump had to go through and what other world leaders have had to go through, given George Soros's tentacles, not only across Europe and the Caucasus, but also across the United States, certainly widely viewed as a malign and destructive force.
So it doesn't mean that United States may decide to have more active position when it comes to the future negotiation process between Yerevan and Baku, as previously Donald Trump wasn't so much involved in the situation in the South Caucasus. During the Biden's administration, United States of America decided even to provide the weapons to Armenia. What to expect in 2025?
Look, President Trump loves to negotiate. The Abraham Accords in the Middle East, that was his brainchild, and he made it happen. He had, Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, negotiate a wide encompassing peace deal between the Arab Gulf states and Israel. So it would not be surprising if President Trump is involved not only in the Middle East, but also potentially in the South Caucasus to try to support an overarching, peace deal that includes Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Turkey. Look, all these policies under President Biden, when it comes to foreign policy in the Middle East, in Europe, in the South Caucasus, that was President Biden and his team. And the difference between President Biden and his foreign policy and his foreign policy advisors and what you're going to see with President Trump and his foreign policy team, it is going to be night and day. So the fact that you have a new administration here means that a significant amount of the Biden foreign policy, whether it's on the Middle East, Europe, or the South Caucasus, you're going to see a completely different track by the Trump team, who completely disagreed with how Joe Biden and his team handled foreign policy on a number of levels. And I think the stronger relationship between Washington and Ankara will likely translate to better American positions and relations in the South Caucasus. And that will ultimately, I think, be very critical for a peace deal to be realized once and for all between Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Turkey. And I think that is possible. That is in the cards for 2025 with President Trump in the White House. Anything is possible. You have a negotiator. He wants to see mutual prosperity. We saw President Trump's envoy in the Balkans negotiate a deal between Albania and Serbia. We saw the Abraham Accord. So I would not be surprised if President Trump emboldens his team to seek a similar type of overarching normalization deal for Azerbaijan and Armenia, and of course Turkey playing an important role. President Trump loves these big deals, and the fact that you have somebody that's different from Joe Biden, he has a different approach, you see, I think is a positive signal for the American position when it comes to the South Caucasus in the future. Of course, we have to be still, that we have to be cautious. We haven't seen any major announcement by President Trump when it comes to the South Caucasus. They're still very much focused on the war in Ukraine, the conflict in Europe, the Middle East, the ongoing conflict there with Iran is a major concern in its nuclear program, and of course, China. But the fact that you're already seeing President Trump praise, of course, Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan, and Turkey has that strategic alliance with Azerbaijan. I think that's a positive sign that you're certainly going to see a much different approach compared to the previous Biden administration.
Well, Obay, thank you. Thank you so much for joining our discussion today.
My pleasure.